All right, guys, so continuation of the dyno episodes here at MMI. We are in the dyno room once again with Jimmy Mack. You guys be sure to go give him a follow on Instagram. He's doing lots of cool shit with motorcycles.
This bike has been in our lobby forever. Let me show you something that you don't get to see very often on a 72. Yeah, that's 0.00000. So there's no miles on this or kilometers on this model. If I click the trip, there's actually 0.3 kilometer on this bike. That's how spanking new this is, and what a cool bike. Now students are going to get to work on it. I found a home down here. It's going to get a Screaming Eagle Stage 4 on it, so that comes with that bigger throttle body, CNC heads. This is a 1200, but it's going to get high compression 1200 pistons in it and a set of cams as well. And then I don't know what to do with exhaust yet. I'll start using it as an exhaust, kind of an exhaust mule or workhorse, basically to allow students to change the exhaust pipes and compare graphs with a stage 4. It needs to be a stage 4 because it needs some overlap, right? And when I have a little bit of overlap in the cams, it lets the exhaust actually influence the air charge into the engine. Without overlap, you can change your exhaust up and down, and it really doesn't do that much. But a little bit of cam overlap, and suddenly your exhaust system can be a rock star or a dud.
So you guys were wanting to see a comparison against the Indian Scout. So whenever I brought the bikes in here, we did the Iron 883 versus the Indian Scout versus the Yamaha Bolt. Many of you out there said that we needed to compare it versus a 1200 Sportster. Jimmy set us up with this Harley-Davidson Sportster 72, which is just insane that it has the no miles on it, essentially. And I kind of feel bad about putting it on a dyno, but like he said, they're going to be doing a stage 4 to it, so this engine is coming apart. So I do feel kind of bad, but it's also it's a classroom bike. I would say we're not doing any disservice to it. If anything, it's helping us to spread education, and so that's what we're on about in these episodes, showing you guys the power numbers, the actual power numbers, not the manufacturer claims. We're looking at the power to the rear wheel. Yeah, we're going to be able to kind of compare that to the Scout that we just dynoed. We're going to be able to compare it to a 1200 with the stage 1, which we're going to be doing next, and then yeah, the 883, which we did previously, as well as the Bolt. Going to go ahead and do some pulls.
Quite as climactic as a 8,000 RPM run will do, but this is a 1200 export model, right? So full disclosure here, this is an export model. So I'm going to get rid of everything we're looking at, and we'll just pull up these 3 runs.
It looks like export models have a lower RPM.
Yeah, so the stock, looks like the stock module is killing it at 5,000. I have no reason why. I would only assume that it has something to do with our international laws, or maybe some countries want it to be there, but there's a ton of potential for this motorcycle, and it is being left out at 5,000. However, even though we're out at 5, the power band, if I jump back, remember from one of those previous videos, we talked about motorcycles having a 2,000 RPM power band. So if I back up 1,000 and another 1,000, this bike actually goes back even farther. I started sampling at 2,000, and it's making power for about 2,500 RPM. Nice and strong through the center. This is your horsepower line. Looks a little backwards here because we're under 5,000. Anytime we're under 5,000, torque reigns, and torque is your baby right through here. So if a guy has a 5,000 RPM motorcycle and bragging about all the horsepower they make. What, you're bragging about this part? It never crosses yet. They cross at 5252. That's a constant in the formula for horsepower and torque. So they're 5252, those are in both formulas, and they are equal when they get there. But this kid's making peak torque at 3500. So that also brings me to another part that I hear a lot about Sportster riders. I hear a lot of the, oh, I need to put a chain conversion on it because I want to drop the engine down to 2800 and ride right there. Totally okay to do that, cruising at 70 and 2800, 2700, but the bike is making peak torque right here at this 3300. I believe it's 3300 at stock gearing at 70 miles an hour on a 1200. So that puts you right just before peak torque, and that's so when you open the throttle, you're working through the peak torque section to accelerate. It also allows you to slow down and slow down even more and still be in a nice strong torque area. For those of you that want to cruise down the interstate at say 2700, well, that's great. You're over here when you're working your power, but if you slow down to say 60, you're out of the power band. Now, I didn't start sampling at 1500. I'm doing it at right around 2000. If I was to go a little earlier, we could interpolate that this would sit out over here somewhere. And it just shows that you're at a lower RPM and that you'd have a long ways to go to get up here to peak torque. Personally, guys, I like to be right around peak torque where I cruise. That way, the moment you whack the throttle, you have the most torque possible. Torque is what moves the vehicle. It's what gets it going from a traffic light. That's what gets it going when you're cruising, because you're not way up here when you cruise. Not a bad run, but this is your typical stock export 1200 Harley, and this one is brand new. We put the first 4 kilometers on it.
Kilometers.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a max power of 52.81 for horsepower and a max torque of 59.06. That torque is, I mean, it's super steady, very predictable. US version's redlining what, 55? I mean, so you're only looking at like another 500 RPM.
Yeah, and you can see that torque's falling off anyway. So you could just draw a line. I mean, you could just literally take something and go, okay, that's probably where it's going to be. You know, it's gonna hit 55 horsepower if I just was to match it up with that line. And then trending, this one's kind of trending down, right? So you would watch it and it would cross and be under 55 if you kept continuing to rev it out. You know, mathematically speaking, like if it was only math, you could calculate this and then zing it out to 20,000 RPMs and it would just go, and you could say, oh, I make, you know, 400 horsepower. The reality is, I mean, it is true. If you do the math will lie to you, because it doesn't take into account limitations like, you know, the design of the cams, the size of the heads, the size of the valves, the, you know, mechanical limitations that are there. It doesn't take into account any of that stuff, where the dyno, you're measuring at the back wheel. At least on a chassis dyno, we're measuring right at the back wheel. And these guys, you can see why Harley doesn't advertise horsepower. It's very rare that they advertise a horsepower number, and that's because the operating range, right, the target operating range is not horsepower strong, it's torque strong, it's tractor strong. You know, diesels make tons of torque right through here, right? But and if you look at any modern diesel, especially an inline 6, they're limited on RPM. They don't rev very high, so they don't usually brag about the big horsepower numbers. It's the torque that you're looking at, and these engines make a lot of torque. However, Sportsters have a shorter stroke than big twins do. 4.375 stroke on the big twins and 3.8125 on the Sportsters. A shorter stroke means we can have more piston speed, means we can have more RPM, and this trend that you see will like to continue to buzz on out there if you add the components to let it do that.
So there's the numbers, guys, for 1200, which, based on it being an export tune, since it does redline a little sooner than a domestic.
We always modify these things, and usually they come in and then they hit the lift, and our students tear into them and build these motors up pretty good. And when they do that, I might get like a run or two in the beginning so we can compare it, what it looked like when it was stock. But for the most part,
they're going to be modified. And that is one of the awesome things about the Harley-Davidson Sportster, is that there are so many aftermarket options for this platform. It's one of those reasons that people absolutely love it, because you can customize it to the nines. I mean, whichever direction you want to go, there's an option available for this platform. So next up, we are going to have a Harley-Davidson Sportster 1200, but with the stage 1.
And by the way, if you have an export model, that's not a bad thing. Like, you can totally change that if you're looking for more power. Domestic models are normally limited by exhaust system and intake system. The rest of the engines are the same. So by switching out the intake and switching out the muffler setup versus mainly the mufflers, so a slip-on exhaust and an airbox change, and some of them have a gear difference. So depending on, you know, if it's going to Japan or something, it's going to have a unique final drive setup on it for that particular market. But as long as you can count the teeth and make sure they're the same. And then there's a canister down here, an evac canister or charcoal canister hanging under the bottom that you might note, and that could go away. And then you see the signals are amber instead of red, so that's kind of unique to the export stuff. Headlight might be different depending on the year, and of course the speedometer change. But from a performance standpoint, it's here, and then it just needs some type of a download or map or a tuner.
Yeah, it's usually pretty easy to remove the or adjust the red line with a tuner, and then the rest of it's, I mean, air cleaner, easy replacement, exhaust, easy replacement. Well, there you go. Beautiful 72, brand new, beautiful 72. Hey, I just want to go on record. If you guys ever decide to scrap this, I will totally trade you tins, because this black and gold is beautiful. It's sexy. I don't think it'll ever happen, but you know, I'm just putting it out there. Finding a 72 is hard enough, and then finding a 72 that is in this good of condition with the Hard Candy Customs paint. I don't think I've ever seen one in gold like this. So
it is, yeah, it's an in-person thing. Pictures don't do it justice.
No,
and I'll tell you what else you guys are missing. This bike smells like a brand new 72. We can smell the hot plastic, we can smell the paint. I mean, it's amazing. It smells like a brand new bike.
Started it up and it's warming up on the dyno, and it's like, what does that smell? Oh, that's new bike smell.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, next up, what did you call this? Orange Crush?
Yeah, we just called it the nickname Orange Crush.
Nice.
So this bike is a bike that we utilize for students to, number one, learn how to ride, and number two, perform dyno tuning on this with the Screaming Eagle Pro Street tuner. So this one has a stock engine, but it has the stage 1 slip-on, it has a stage 1 air filter, Screaming Eagle stuff. We have some of these things here coming down the side. Now these are sample tubes just to make it easy for us, for our students to get on and off the dyno fast, because I'll have a team come in here of 2, and they'll get on this bike. One will measure one cylinder and the other one will measure the other cylinder. We treat it like 2 different engines, because in reality it is 2 different engines. They share the same crank pin, they share a common intake track, but this has a set of cams all by itself. There's 4 cams in a Sportster. That's why you hear them referred to as quad cams. This kid's got its own 2 cams, its own cam timing. It's got its own cylinder head, its own compression ratio. It has its own, different shaped exhaust system. So this one's going to run at a different temperature as well. So because of that, it has its own tuning requirements. And the same thing with the front. The front's in its own world. It gets more air, it runs a different temperature, it's got its own cams, it has its own compression ratio. Although they're supposed to be the same, tolerances and variances in construction changes the total outcome ever so slightly, and believe it or not, it makes a difference. Students will do one and the other, will measure it, and then they take the bike out of here and they get on the computer and they adjust the map for one student does one cylinder, one student does the other, and then when they're happy with what they've changed, they'll download the bike with the new map, and then they come in here and measure it again and find out where they are today. I made this much change, let's compare the 2 runs and I can see what I actually did, and then if it needs more, which usually they're in here a lot. So this just helps facilitate in and out, in and out, in and out, so they can, by the time they get to that point in this class, they're not even thinking about running the bike. Running the bike is second nature to them, loading the bike second nature to them. They're basically kind of playing a video game as far as the tune-up is concerned. It's pretty awesome.
Basically, like, you attach a sniffers to that.
Yeah, so what I got over here is a box. And in this box I have 2 wideband O2 sensors, front and rear, so we'll measure front and rear at the same time. And then I've got a couple of hoses here, and we do go through the whole setup on this, on how to measure them and make sure they're happy. But then we install these tubes, and we'll pull some air fuel lines on this one since it's going to be so easy to do. Make sure they're not on the ground, we don't trip over them. So a new hazard in here for you. Turn the power on this baby, and then when we're ready to rock and roll, this one makes a live real-time sample. If I'm on the bike and I shut the throttle, it's instantaneous to these O2 sensors as far as the dyno is concerned. So you can look at the dyno, you can see where I shut the throttle, and you can see where the air fuel line goes lean at the exact same spot. That way, whatever I see in the graph and whatever I see on the bottom, that way they react to each other. Older dynos, there was a delay. So something would happen up here, and then you would see something on the bottom, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. This one runs off of air. So once we get running, we're gonna flip this on, and then this is super loud, so you won't be able to talk at all. So flip that on before we go. We'll pull a couple air lines, and then we can talk about it on the dyno as well when we get to that spot.
And this one, I assume, with the slip-ons, we will need hearing protection.
Yeah, this is gonna get loud.
Oh, it almost matches.
So let's start with horsepower, and I'll just put horsepower. Oop, didn't mean to put the cursor on there. Let's get rid of this. Let's just put horsepower on there real quick, and we can see that the 72 on there, you know, it's kind of choked down with its stock stuff, and it's stopping here at 90 miles an hour in 4th gear. And you can see that this one just, that extra 2,000 RPMs, that sucker zings all the way to 7, and it just surpasses 70 horsepower, and it's there for a minute. There's a range right there. You go 110, 100 to 110, you get 10 mile an hour sitting there at 70. So anyway, that's just your horsepower. You can see that, yeah, mathematically it looks like it'll just keep climbing, and you notice it starts to ease over. So the reason why this kind of rolls over and chills out right here is because there's some kind of a restriction to airflow in the engine. Typically this could be from your camshaft, right? The cams are running out of lift and duration for moving air at that high RPM. It could also be from the port and the head. It could be the throttle body's a little small. It could be your exhaust system limiting that. So there's several factors on there that could slow this down. On most of our race bikes, this literally just climbs and climbs and climbs because we get rid of any restriction whatsoever. However, we sacrifice torque and where that torque is at. So we're going to jump back over here, and I want to show you guys torque. Anytime you have torque, you have to have engine RPM to make that comparable. So peak torque on the 72 is just under 60 right here, and this is the torque curve for the 72. It's nice and flat. I have the same type of torque curve over here. I just have more of it, right? We went from like a 60 peak to a 72 peak, a good 10 foot-pounds of torque, and then horsepower, you know, almost 20. It's quite 60, 70. Yeah, we went almost 20 horsepower jump just with the stage 1. This is one of the beauties about the rubber mount 04 and up Sportster. Our power band is literally starting way down here at 2500, and it sits at real close to 70, on 70, a little over 70, still at 70. Horsepower takes over, we're still at 70, and we're really close to 70, all the way to 7,000 RPMs. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. It's 4,500 RPM power band. This is a very, very fun motorcycle to ride, and it's got a nice wide power band. for a street bike with pump gas, a mild street bike to go ride around, that's a lot of fun. That thing doesn't even weigh much, you know. Cool bike, cool improvement.
So that is with, as he was saying, a stage 1. And so just looking, because I know a lot of you guys are going to be wondering if you have a stock bike or stock Sportster and you're looking to do a stage 1, it's pretty much like step 1 in the performance upgrade process. So just looking at the components that they have, kind of, you know, re-going over it. They've got a high flow air cleaner, which is from Screaming Eagle. Slip-ons, right? So the header pipes are the same, and it's just the slip-ons. So Screaming Eagle slip-ons. And then a tuner, which is the Pro Street tuner, right?
Yep.
That's a complete stage 1. You've got air cleaner, tuner, and exhaust. Biggest significant increase to that power is obviously you're processing more air, but you want to have the right tune. A lot of people will skimp on the tuner and just do an air cleaner and just do exhaust. But the thing is, the engine is running from a stock tune that isn't picking up a higher flow air cleaner or more free flowing exhaust, and then they'll skimp out on this. It'll seem like it changes a little bit, but the Screaming Eagle tuner, or whatever tuner you do go with, is going to be probably one of the most significant changes that you're definitely going to feel as per the dyno numbers there.
So let's say you're going to mix a drink, right? And I hate to use alcohol for this particular
I love your examples. They're great.
But I need something that we can relate to, right? So if you ask me to pour you a drink and I give you, you know, 3 fingers in a whiskey glass, and then we top it off with Coke, right? If that's how you drink your drink, that's the Coke to bourbon ratio that you like, okay? If I get you a bigger glass and go 3 fingers and then fill the rest of that glass up with Coke, that bourbon to Coke ratio is going to be off. Your drink's going to taste watered down. It's not going to be strong enough for you. Your engine feels the same way.
About air and fuel.
Air and fuel, yeah. So here we are mixing a drink for our engine from the factory, and it's got this much air, and we put this much fuel in it, right? So, or air, this much air capacity, but put this much fuel in it, and the rest we filled up with air, and that's the right ratio for the bike. And then you turn around and put an air filter on it and exhaust on it, and now we've just increased our air potential, right? And we're still putting a little bit of fuel in it, and now a whole bunch of air, and our air to fuel ratio is off. It's too lean, it's watered down, and the bike don't like it. It runs hot, it doesn't make good power. And if you beat it like that, if you really were to beat it up, you'll start torching pistons and pushing head gaskets and causing some really bad problems.
So can you explain the difference between lean and rich?
Sure. So that's a great question. Reading spark plugs is a whole nother topic that we'll get on.
Oh yeah.
But
that'll be a Tech Tuesday.
Maybe that'll be a Tech Tuesday or a future something for you. But most of the time when I see spark plugs on Facebook and people are going, look at my spark plugs, the #1 comment I see from other Facebook guys are, oh, it's lean, scary. So spark plugs are not lean and scary all the time. Typically they need to look like a spark plug you just took out of the bike. Today we have the ability to make the engine very, very efficient, and with the combustion chamber designs that we have, the air fuel ratios that we use, the type of fuel that we're using, the spark timing that we have, the fuel delivery method that we have now, it's all computer, it's super fast, and I'm doing it at a high pressure versus what it used to be with a carburetor. Today's fuel injection bikes need a very lean looking spark plug because we can do that and get away with it, but we can also change it to rich when you need power, and that's the difference. I'm going to blow this one graph up, and you can see that I've got numbers on the side. You might not be able to pick that up really well, but basically I'm 10 on the bottom and I go to 18 on the top. This is 10 parts air to 1 part fuel, and that's 18 air to 1 fuel. So that's almost double the air to the fuel ratio, meaning that when this line is up high, we are lean, and when the line is a little down low, it is richer. So when the line's high, it's lean. When it's low, it's rich. And what we're seeing here is, in the beginning, when I first opened the throttle, it is leaner than 14. Perfect combustion is theory to sit right here at 14 and a half. 14.7 is what we would call stoich. So stoichiometric is what we're shooting for economy, right? But your engine doesn't want to be that lean under power. It doesn't mind it being that lean when you're cruising, because that's how you get your fuel economy you like so much. You have to run it lean for fuel economy. It doesn't hurt anything. It's just getting the best economy you can get. But once we get into our power band and when the cams start to kick in, we need to go richer. Now I have a dotted line across here for a target line for my students, and you can see the last group of students that tuned this bike did a pretty damn good job gaining control over this air fuel line, front and rear cylinder, getting them on that line. Now this is not the best line, guys. This is just my recommendation for 13.2 air fuel ratio. That's a good safe spot to be. It's not gonna hurt anything. It's not gonna make the most power there. I don't know where it's gonna make the most power. That's why we have this tool. We'll go richer and hunt for power. The bike tells you. If I go down this way and the bike makes more power, I keep going down, little bit, baby step, baby step, baby step, watching this power. When the power goes up and then starts going down again, I know that's enough. And I found where I wanna go. Most people are looking for the most horsepower. I never look for the most horsepower. I look for loss of power at both ends of my spectrum. If I find where I lost power on the rich side and then baby stepped my way to the lean side and lost power, then by default, I found where I make the most power. I'll do that with the front cylinder, and then I'll go do it with the rear cylinder.
That's cool. So it's you're finding a balance.
Right, it's like a dog. If a dog that you don't know comes up to you and you start petting on his head, if you don't pay attention, that dog's gonna move your hand and you're gonna be scratching his butt, not even know it. The dog will let you know what it likes. This bike will let you know what it likes with the power. You just have to pay attention and it'll tell you exactly what it likes. Sometimes the lines lean on one side and rich on the other. Sometimes it's curved and it looks goofy. But if that's what the bike likes and you're paying attention, you put this wherever that bike likes because that's the right place. Like turning an old radio back and forth. And a long time ago they had radios, so you had to turn a dial.
You couldn't find it digitally, yeah.
Yeah, it had a thing that went across in front of you, and you would tune it until you heard the station. And then you go, oh, and then you would go a little farther hoping it would get louder and it'd come in better. And basically it would dip off. And then you'd go back and forth a couple times until you found where it was the longest. That's what we're gonna do with this.
So the numbers that we're looking at for this one, you're looking at a max power of 70.13, it's horsepower, and the torque of 71.91, and that is a stage 1 1200 Sportster. And then the other one, which was the export model, totally stock 1272, you're looking at a max power of 52.81, once again horsepower, and a max torque of 59.06.
60s are kind of normal, and then a typical domestic model you would see in the 60s, and then when you stage 1 you would see about a 10 horsepower increase. That's really common to jump about 10 on a stage 1. This one, since it has the Pro Street tuner, allows us to get a lot more RPM. I mean, you can see that it's happy out here, but torque's starting to fall off, and there's really no reason to go any higher than 6,500. If I am at 65 and I shift, I'm gonna land at about 45, and that's right where peak torque is, and that's what I'm looking for. Guys will shift on the red line, bop, and then shift, and then go to bop every time when the shift light, and they think that's fast. That's not fast. What's fast is landing in peak torque. I choose to shift so I land back on peak torque on this platform. Okay, now if this went straight up to the mile high, then I wouldn't be so worried about it. But peak torque would also shift as well. That's another subject. This subject on this bike, I would buzz this sucker out. My 1-2 shift, I know I lose about 1800 RPM, 1850-ish, 1875 I think on the 1-2 shift, and that would put me right around 4500. So I would shift here at 65, land on 45, and work back out here again. Then about the same thing, I lose 1850 on the 2-3 shift, land about there. And then on the 3-4 shift, it's only 1450, so I would only come out 1450 and shift a little sooner so I could land back here again. And I'm basically working this highest area under the curve right in here. The 4-5 shift is only 1250, so it'd be even shorter. But then once you got in 5th gear, you could just hold it and it would motor all the way out. Of course, you'd be on a closed course competition track only.
Yeah, of course, or in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Or Mexico, yeah.
Right.
All right, guys, so that is the comparison. Oh yeah, if you guys haven't seen the dyno classroom and the engine classroom here at MMI, it's an absolute candy shop. Look at all this, amazing, love it. So that is the comparison between the 1200, if you guys want to look at the numbers from the Indian Scout, because we got that request to dyno the 1200 as per the Indian versus Yamaha Bolt versus Iron 883 video that we did for the giveaway bikes. For those of you that don't know, Indian Scout here, we're giving it away. through Patreon, patreon.com/blockheadmoto if you guys want to join in on that. And we just got the stock or the base power numbers for that. In the last video, I'll be sure to drop the link down in the description below. But yeah, it's ever evolving process. We're learning about all this stuff.
I got free candy in here.
That is ridiculous. Incoming. Thanks as always, man, for this one. Appreciate it. Looking forward to this one too. You guys be sure to go give him a follow. I'll put his Instagram right there, as well as down in the description below. You guys be sure to go give MMI a follow as well. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like. Hitting that like button helps out the channel quite a bit. If you guys want to see more motorcycle content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell icon as well so it sends you notifications of future uploads and activity. Until next time, you guys ride safe out there. Stay vigilant. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.